Imagine if we could build all of mathematics, everything from counting to geometry, purely from logic. That was the dream of the German philosopher and mathematician Gottlob Frege, who lived in the late 19th century. Frege believed that if we could understand how language and reasoning really work, we could show that numbers and mathematics come not from experience, but from pure reason. This project became known as logicism, the idea that mathematics can be reduced entirely to logic. Frege began not with numbers, but with language. He said that to understand what a word means, we have to look at how it works inside a sentence. Take the word wise. On its own, it doesn't tell you much. But in a sentence, say Socrates is wise, it gains meaning. This is Frege's context principle. A word's meaning depends on how it functions within a whole sentence. Before Frege, philosophers thought that every sentence had two parts. The subject, so that's what you're talking about, like Socrates, and the predicate, what you say about the subject, such as is wise. So, Socrates is wise was thought to mean there exists a person called Socrates who has the property of being wise. Frege said this old model didn't quite capture how language works. It doesn't show how the parts of a sentence actually fit together logically to create meaning. It treats Socrates and is wise as two separate things that we merely join, rather than showing that they form a single, unified thought. He proposed a new one, using the idea of a function and an argument borrowed from mathematics. Think of the phrase, x is wise, as a function with a gap in it. When you insert Socrates into the gap, you get a complete thought. Socrates is wise. This made language look a lot like mathematics, where a function like fx becomes meaningful only when you give it an input. This shift from subjects and predicates to functions and arguments helped philosophers and mathematicians analyse sentences much more precisely. Frege also explained that every meaningful expression has two aspects. The first is sense, the way we think about something or the idea we associate with it. The second is reference, the actual thing in the world the word points to. For example, the morning star and the evening star seem different in sense. They describe the planet Venus in different ways, but they have the same reference because both refer to the same planet. This distinction between sense and reference is now central to the philosophy of language. It helps explain how two statements can say different things but still refer to the same object. So Frege's big dream, as I said, was to show that arithmetic, the study of numbers, could be built entirely out of logic. He disagreed with earlier thinkers like Kant, who thought arithmetic relied on how our minds structure experience. Frege believed mathematics could be proven through logic alone, without appealing to the mind or the senses. To do this, he created something entirely new, symbolic logic, which he called the concept script. This was a formal language that could represent logical relationships with mathematical precision. For example, traditional logic could say, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Frege's new logic expressed it like this. For all x, if x is a man, then x is mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. This new system could express quantifiers like all and some, making it far more powerful than Aristotle's older logic. While Aristotle could use all and some in examples, Frege was the first to explain and represent them precisely using symbols and rules, so that reasoning involving all and some could be handled with mathematical accuracy. Aristotle did use all and some, but always in a fixed sentence structure about entire categories, like all A are B. However, it couldn't express more complex ideas such as every student loves some teacher, or there is at least one number greater than 5. In other words, Aristotle's logic was about classes or categories, not about individual objects and their relationships. Frege's improved logic became the foundation of modern logic and of computer science, mathematics, and analytic philosophy today. So let's now turn to Frege and numbers. He wanted to define numbers not as things we discover in the world, but as logical objects. He said that the number connected with a concept, say moon of Venus, depends on how many objects fall under that concept. If no objects fit, then the number is 0. Venus has no moons. If one object fits, the number is 1. If 2 fit, the number is 2, and so on. So, for Frege, numbers are not physical objects, they are logical constructions that depend on the concepts we apply. This led Frege to make another crucial distinction. Objects are things we can name, like Socrates, Venus, or the number 4. Concepts are properties or functions that apply to objects, like is wise or is a moon of Venus. For instance, saying Venus has no moons means there is no object that fits the concept moon of Venus. This distinction between concepts and objects apparently clears up confusion about how language refers to things. After years of work, Frege published The Basic Laws of Arithmetic, where he tried to show that the entire structure of arithmetic could be built logically from the ground up. But just as the second volume was being printed, Bertrand Russell, a young British philosopher at the time, sent him a letter. In it, Russell explained a logical problem that would become known as Russell's paradox. Here's a simple version of the paradox. Imagine a library that keeps a list of all the books that don't list themselves. Now ask, does the library's own catalogue appear on that list? If it does, then it should not, because the list is for books that don't list themselves. But if it doesn't, then it should, because it's now a book that doesn't list itself. In short, that's a logical contradiction. Russell showed that Frege's logical system allowed the creation of this kind of self-referential loop, which led to contradiction. That meant Frege's attempt to build mathematics purely on logic collapsed. It couldn't guarantee consistency. Frege was devastated. He even added a note to the end of his book admitting that Russell's discovery shattered the ground on which his whole project rested. Even though his mathematical project failed, Frege's achievements were enormous. He invented modern symbolic logic, laid the groundwork for the philosophy of language, and transformed how philosophers think about meaning, reference, and mathematics. His work directly inspired Bertrand Russell, Ludwig Wittgenstein, and work within analytic philosophy much more generally. Today, every branch of logic, mathematics, and computer science still depends on much of Frege's work. He showed that precision in language and clarity in reasoning could take us further than anyone had imagined, even if, in the end, his own logical structure proved too perfect to hold itself up, so to speak.